The Republican House Committee is now suing Merrick Garland, just out today, suing to get those audio tapes of Joe Biden in that classified document case. You see, it's important that we hear, not just look at the transcript, but hear just how bad it was. This is theoretically public property, is it not? It is. Robert Hur says he's just too old and feeble, effectively. He can't really get through a jury trial, and most likely they're not going to convict him because they're going to think the guy doesn't know his... Oh, I'm going to be nice. He doesn't know what day it is, okay? You almost had me. Anyway, here's Robert Hur basically saying, yeah, under normal circumstances, he's guilty.
Based on the facts and anticipation of defenses presented in your report, could a reasonable juror have voted to convict?
As I said in the report, some reasonable jurors may have reached the inferences that the government would present in its case in chief at trial.
So a reasonable juror could have voted to convict based on the facts that you presented?
Correct.
Correct. But you know what? We're not dealing with a normal president of the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen. We are dealing with poor Joe Biden, whose performance was so abysmal on Thursday night on CNN. It was shocking, okay? Shocking. Well, not shocking for you or me, right? Because we've been looking at all the tape that's come in. We've run the tape. We've run it in its entirety. This was no cheap fake. This was real stuff, okay? Real stuff. We ran it in its entirety, and you can see how feeble he is. You can see how his gait is so challenged. You can see that this is a gentleman at 81 years old who is not, as they say, what he once was. But more than that, it does seem, and I'm not a doctor, so I'll qualify it with that, but it does seem as though this is the beginning of some kind of dementia. There are new reports surfacing on Politico and Axios talking about how the staff members in the House say that he's kind of walled off, that Jill does everything along with his chief of staff, and nobody else is really allowed access to him. Why? Because they don't want the rest of the staff to see him in the position he's in. In other words, she's become some kind of full-time nurse, and they're trying to hide this from the public. It's like Edith Wilson, Woodrow Wilson's wife, who after Woodrow had a stroke, tried to hide him away. And by the way, became a center of power herself, right? Because she controlled who got access, who did not. She controlled the decision making. Well, there's a little bit of that going on. I keep joking that if they were to run that commercial about where's your president at 3 a.m., would the president pick up the phone? Not in this case. Not according to all the articles we've seen that say, he's really best between the working hours of 10 and 4. After 4 p.m., good luck. Well, what does that mean for 3 a.m.? I think it means Dr. Jill's on the phone picking up that call. Dr. Jill's doing it all. That's kind of frightening, everyone. That's concerning. Well, that debate was so darn bad, so bad that, you know what? This president felt very strongly, or at least his wife did, and some of the handlers around him, so strongly that they needed to change the narrative. And by changing the narrative, they needed to come up with something else. So they were lucky that the Supreme Court handed them something. Now, in my estimation, the Supreme Court did what it needed to do, which was to come forward and say there are some cases where we're going to protect the president of the United States. We're going to offer up this immunity because it's effectively implied. And it should be there. But in his personal life, of course, that's anybody's business. That's all separate. So you're being offered protection on the job. Kind of think of it like indemnity, right? An indemnity clause. In other words, if I were to say something while working for an institution like, say, Fox, as I used to, and I said something that I shouldn't have said maybe on the air or whatever. And by the way, you could debate that because in this case, I think the president will say I was perfectly justified doing everything that I did. But you'd be indemnified against that working for that corporation. But in your personal life, you're not indemnified. Well, that's kind of what the court was trying to put forward here. You're sort of indemnified, right? You've got this immunity, so to speak. They can't just throw you in jail for something you did or said if it was pertinent to what was going on at the time and you thought you were acting in an official capacity. Makes sense. But Joe Biden is desperate, ladies and gentlemen. He is absolutely desperate to turn the narrative around. So what did he do? He decided to have a primetime address with a teleprompter, of course. No teleprompter on this show, by the way. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like. Make sure you share. But definitely subscribe and hit that bell. No teleprompter on this show. Joe Biden had a nice little teleprompter right in front of him. yesterday. He made it all the way up to 7:45. He had to be in bed by 8, though. Probably. The other thing that happens at 8 o'clock is the primetime networks have their programming. So if he had gone into 8 o'clock, oh my goodness, all HELL would have broken loose. He would have really lost the networks then, even more than he's lost them now. So you see, he had to get out by 8. So it ended around 7:57 or so. It gives the networks enough time to change the tape and make sure that they have all their primetime program lined up. So that programming hit, but not before he got the chance to go on about how he dissents. I dissent. He didn't like the Supreme Court decision. Watch.
Justice Sotomayor's dissent today. Here's what she said. She said, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. End of quote.
Yeah. You see, he's quoting there Sonia Sotomayor. And she did have the dissent, and he went on about how he dissents. He couldn't quite make it through the entire spiel. I mean, it was on teleprompter, but he still struggles, even on a teleprompter, to get the words out. It was better than normal. Also, I have one little thing to add. Guys, did you notice this? I want to actually point this out. I want to highlight this because I'm pretty sure I saw something there. I'm pretty sure I saw a Joe Biden with a tan, right? Could that be possible? I mean, take a look at the guy again. Drew, if we can cue that tape up, I think there's another orange man in the house. I think that he's figured out he better put on a little bit of makeup. They better warm up the lights, and they better get a little spray tan in on the action. You see what I'm talking about? I mean, you look at him the other night, forget about it. He looked awful. Donald Trump looked vibrant and frankly, like his son. I mean, he really did look like 30 years younger. So Joe Biden's talking slow and he's looking old. Not a good recipe